Welcome back. I'm playing Warhammer 40,000 Battlesector, and today I thought I would go back and look at the factions that we've already reviewed, because by now I have completed the roster review of every faction, and given how much time it's taken to go through pretty much every faction and every unit in the game, there's been several updates to different factions here that have changed how certain units play, and my opinions on certain units from when I first released the review video has changed. So I thought it would be kind of helpful to just provide an updated recommendation here. This will be fairly brief. I'll just kind of make my way through each faction. I don't think I'll be able to go through every faction in one video here because I think that'll take too long. Some factions actually feel really good, and a couple other ones feel less so. But I thought I would just, like I said, provide some updated thoughts here. But first, if you're enjoying these videos, please give my channel a like and subscribe to encourage me to post more content for you. So, the first unit I just wanted to briefly discuss is the Invictor Warsuit. I was pretty down on this unit when it was first released. It was a free unit that was released, so always appreciative of that. But I really didn't see a lot of use for this guy because I was really only focusing on using him as a flamer. And for the cost of 150, my recommendation is just go with the Furioso. And I think if you're going to go with a flame build, that is still good advice. But I have played more matches now, and I've slightly changed my thoughts on this. I was pretty negative on the autocannon, but there are some matchups where it can be quite powerful, especially against the orcs and also the demons, who just have a lot of HP that you have to hit through without a lot of armor. So with the autocannon, especially if you buff them with the Tech Marine, this will allow you to stand on big open maps and be able to snipe out, you know, pain boys, or weird boys, things like that, pretty easily and get the kill. And then if not, you can follow it up with some of these other attacks that he has and then just do a little bit of HP damage. So for the most part, I do rarely use this unit, but there are some uses in certain matchups that he can be decent with. So I just wanted to provide my thought there. The other unit that I've kind of changed my mind on are the Death Company. I was pretty negative about them, but now I've kind of, for most matchups, I still think they're not the best unit to bring compared to the standard Assault Marines. But it seems like the Black Rage is triggering much more. And what I don't think I understood is that if you kill units with your flamers, so let's say you're jumping in here and you're going to attack a bunch of Hormagaunts, or you're playing against the Astra Militarum and there's just some little infantry Cadian shock troops in front of you, you jump in front of them here, you use your hand flamer, you do a full squad wipe. That will, if you're taking out those low tier units, which is, you know, up to 10 units, then at 35% it seems like it's getting triggered much more than that 35%, so I'm automatically getting all 5 stacks on a single squad wipe here. And then if you do that, because these guys start out with 65 momentum, that's then enough to get these guys to be able to surge. And so then when you're having your full Black Rage stacks, that's giving you plus 25 melee damage. Now they're going to have minus 50 evasion, so they're going to be really easy to counterattack, but that plus 25 melee damage to, you know, so that means they're going to be doing, what is that, 35 to 49 damage per model here. So it's not uncommon to get upwards of, you know, 150 to over 200 damage against a heavily armored unit with these guys, because they do have an armor piercing of 5. So these guys definitely have a much better usage here for that attack. And then the following turn, your opponents are going to have to focus on taking these guys out. Otherwise, you're going to be able to smack them again with that much damage here, because these guys get to be crazy good once you get that all set up here. So definitely wanted to give a repeat thought there. And then what I would also add is, I think that's pretty much the same for these guys. Overall, the Blood Angels feel like they're in a pretty good spot right now. But those were definitely 2 areas that I kind of changed my thoughts on over time. Going to the Tyranids, they're actually not terrible right now in terms of things I would change, or not change, but in terms of my opinions that have changed over time, there's definitely things I would change, and perhaps I'll do a different series with my thoughts on different things that I would recommend changing. But what I would kind of change my thoughts on is I was really negative against the Biovore here. But that's, I have played many opponents who really love using the Biovores, and definitely on certain maps I've given different thoughts now. So like on the ruins or the bridge or hive top, if you can get this guy on the sides and then just shoot a bunch of mines every turn, because now this is down to a 1-turn cooldown, whereas before it had a several turn cooldown. You can just throw mines down to hold spots and lock down infantry, do some real interesting things here. Now just realize that the spores that these guys drop are not the same as the tier 3 spores that you drop on your command ability. These ones are much weaker, but especially if you start stacking up some synapses, these guys count as indirect fire, so they can shoot over obstacles. Like I said, if you're on the hive tops or the ruins, you put this guy behind the wall and you just shoot over the wall, and you can just really mess up your opponent's infantry, and because most of the time they're going to try to body block with the infantry, and that will allow you to do pretty good damage. And then even with the base damage of 45 to 60, armor piercing of 4, it can still do somewhat decent damage against some vehicles. So definitely given some thoughts to certain matchups where the Biovore is definitely viable. And I was actually expecting the Biovore to get more play when it was first released. I thought, oh my god, this is going to be amazing. You know, for 110 points, we're going to have another Flamer unit. But it's just so easy to snipe down that it almost never gets utilized by players that are more experienced players, I should say, because they're either going to spend the more points to go for this Tyran effects, which will then allow you to easily stack up momentum and surge and do multiple attacks. And then when he dies, he doesn't end up exploding. Plus, he has a melee attack as well to give you zone of control. So this was something I definitely was wrong about, was the Biovore. I thought that was going to be the backbone of a lot of games, but I was wrong on that. I rarely see it, and the unit I thought was real sucky. I mean, for the most part, there's other units I'd rather have, but there's definitely matchups where this is a pretty decent option. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention is when I was doing the momentum and command point ability, I think I had mentioned how the Venom Strafe would bug out occasionally, and that was a real bummer when that happened. That no longer occurs, so definitely not an issue, and which is good, because that Venom Strafe is definitely a real good ability, especially with the follow-up poison damage that it can do against factions that can't heal poison damage, because it allows you to do some real significant squad wipes. So everything else I think is pretty consistent with my opinions for the Tyranids. In terms of the Necrons, there have been several changes to their units. Probably the first unit that was changed is the Skorpeks now have 4 movement instead of 3, so that makes it much easier for you to get charge attacks and get them into melee combat. So definitely makes these guys much more viable, because especially when you give them these Reaper blades, they can do insane amount of damage against single unit or heavy unit or vehicles, whereas this, you know, the Threshers are okay, they give you a little bit of splash and things like that, but nothing amazing. But now that they've got all that charge ability, that dramatically improves these guys' viability. The biggest change has to do with the Deathmarks, and then also the Flayed ones. When it was first released, dimensional translocation cost an action point, whereas now it's a free action. Sorry, I thought I was going to sneeze. So now you can teleport within 3 tiles, because I think before it was more teleporting range but took up the action point, whereas now it's a free action. So that really helps you use the Flayed ones to be able to teleport behind enemy lines and try to get some rear attacks so they can get the most out of their damage potential here, or lock guys down into melee combat and then not get shot up by Overwatch, because these guys can't take very much hits. And then for the Deathmarks, it's better to use these guys. If somebody locks them into melee, just dimensional gate out of there, move, and then shoot them. So that's kind of a better way. Plus it makes it less obnoxious for these guys to just be teleporting around the map to capture points, because now it's limited to the 3 tiles. So definitely some good changes that add to some viability here and make things much more interesting, especially for the Flayed ones. And the other thing that was a huge change to the Necrons is when the Scarabs were first released. They had the ability for reanimation protocols, so that would effectively mean you'd have to guarantee 2 attacks on Scarab. So these were some of the most cost-effective units in the game to body block a strategic command point, because you'd have to waste 2 different attacks to wipe them off of that point, because with 10 models there was going to be at least 2 that were going to reanimate. So now they no longer have the reanimation protocol, so that's definitely something to note, because definitely early on, like I said, these were the most cost-effective body blockers in the game. So hopefully that's helped, but otherwise the Necrons feel like they're in a really good spot right now. Those are just a couple of units that I would change my thoughts on. Now, the Adeptus Sororitas, they have several things that I've kind of changed my thoughts on. One, I was kind of down on the Canoness when I first released my video, and after seeing some very experienced players that kind of main the Adeptus Sororitas, and after I finally learned how to use them more effectively, I totally recant everything I said about her. I mean, yes, she's very expensive, but that's because she's effectively one of the best duelists in the entire game. She can solo a Bloodthirster, assuming the Bloodthirster doesn't land 2 attacks on her during its attack turn, because then he'll be able to kill her. But if it comes down to a one-on-one, and she starts the attack, there's a good chance she's going to win, especially if you give her the Blessed Blade here, because she'll be doing, 130 some to 180, because she has 2 attacks compared to the Bloodthirster, who has 1, and then she has 100% accuracy. She's one of the few units in the game that has 100% accuracy, so she's not going to be missing her melee attacks, which is kind of insane, because like I said, almost everything else has either an 80 or 90% accuracy, and she goes up to 100% here. And then the big thing is when she lands her, somebody attacks her, she has a full attack when she's countering, so that allows her to do significant damage. She suffers 15%, she just has a straight up 15% damage reduction. If she gets killed, everybody starts to get 50% momentum gains. You can use the Words of Contempt to take away an action point from one of your opponents. So if they have somebody that's really powerful nearby, well, just take away one of their action points, and then also reduce their accuracy by 50%, their evasion, and their movement points, and effectively you're going to be able to kill whatever unit you just debuffed. And then on top of that, you can end up putting on a 10% bonus HP and a 10% damage mitigation on everybody within 1 tile of her, and that lasts for 2 turns. So you stack that up with additional bonus HP from the Rites of Intercession, and you have certain units that also, if they get attacked, you have a 50% chance to get additional ranged and melee armor, and now all of a sudden you can see how you can make these girls really hard to take out, especially if they are getting hit with a bunch of low armor piercing damage. Then they're going to be gaining momentum, and as that momentum gets up, then their evasion goes up, and that just gets things to spiral out of control, especially if you throw the Rhino smokescreen down. That gives you just a straight up 15% evasion. It can be a real nightmare to kill these ladies here. So it definitely gave some reconsideration to the Canoness here, because I did not give her the love she deserved. I think I was also a little down on the Sacrascents. They're actually one of my favorite units now, just because of the increased armor they can get. You can end up using the Oath of Protection, and that will allow them to soak up some Overwatch with some increased armor and bonus HP. You can also use the shield, or their shield just straight up gives them a 15% damage mitigation. So again, stacking up with some of these other buffs, and then these ladies can be really hard to take out, and they hit pretty hard with their armor piercing of 6, and so you can just lock a bunch of guys down. A unit I was also pretty down on were the Celestians. I've given some reconsideration to them. I still think for their regular bolter attack it's just shit for 70 points, but the weapon loadout I think is much better than I originally attributed, is by giving these ladies the Flamers. Now for 90 points you have a pretty decent 5-unit Flamer that has a range of 2, and then they have pretty good survivability. And the big thing with these is they can flame through vehicles. So you can set up your Rhino and your Immolators to be in the front line. You can unload these ladies behind them, and then when enemy opponents are sitting there getting ready to charge into them to do damage, especially say if you're fighting Tyranids, which most of their anti-armor attacks are requiring them to be in the melee range, you can just sit there and wipe them out with flame attacks. So definitely a good use for these ladies here. Mixed feelings on the Melta-Guns. I think for the most part I'd much rather have the Seraphim with their Inferno pistols, because that's 100 points, and then these ladies with their Melta-Guns are 100 points as well. So I'd rather just have the evasion, the mobility, and then having these ladies here with the Inferno pistols. The pistols give them a zone of control, so if anybody tries to run away they can get attacks, and then that can give them double attacks with the Hospitaller. So definitely the Seraphim much better in my opinion with the Inferno pistols than spending the Melta-Gun points here. The other thing I wanted to mention is, I don't recall this always being a thing, but it certainly is now, is with the Sister Repentia. When you're using their charge attack, the Martyrdom, effectively what that does is you get a free charge attack even if you're right next to the opponents, and it gives you plus 20% damage, and you start taking more damage back. The reason that's okay is because with the Martyrdom, then if every unit that gets killed in the squad, so up to 5 units, that should give plus 20 momentum to everybody around. But when they use the Martyrdom charge, it doesn't say this, but it always guarantees that there'll be a counter attack even if you're doing a rear attack. So this is the only ability in the game that you can rear attack opponents and they'll still do a counter attack on you. So just be aware of that being a thing, because it can be quite frustrating when you're getting in there, you're going to use Martyrdom and to trigger the 20% damage output, and then you get a unit killed, and then you're doing a second attack with one of the units being wiped out. So just be aware of that being an issue. I was quite enthralled with the Exorcist when it was first released. However, now I've become quite negative, and I almost never use the Exorcist, because for 240 points and understanding how the Adeptus Sororitas work with stacking buffs, I find that that's a lot of points, and I'd rather have a lot more infantry going because of the increased survivability. I mean, it still has some decent damage. You know, it's got some good splash, it's got decent armor piercing, you get a free bolter attack every 2 turns, you have a 100% chance to hit with the Hunter Killer Missile. So I certainly wouldn't necessarily change the cost on these units, but I think they're definitely meant to help you as a beginner, and then as you get more experience using other units, there's just better uses of your points. But I still think it's one of the best artillery pieces in the game, but I would rather have those points spent elsewhere. So a little down on the Exorcist now, and I would say the only time I ever see it used is against more inexperienced players. A unit I have changed my opinion on is the Immolator. I mean, I still think giving him the Flamers is the best way to go. I never used the heavy bolters, but now that the Astra Militarum have been released, I think that's definitely an easy matchup where it really makes a lot of sense to bring the twin multi-meltas, because it not for lowering the cost by 15, so now you're getting a 195 unit here that has transport capabilities and heavy armor and a free bolter attack every 2 turns. I think this can be a no-brainer against the Sisters, especially because this guy can soak up a bunch of Overwatch shots for you, and then you can unload some Repentia right in the face of a tank and start killing them, or your Canoness, other units that can do significant amounts of damage, or if you're going to use the, the multi-meltas or any other infantry, they can definitely do a lot of work for you. So one of the few matchups where I'd actually recommend using the multi-meltas here. The other thing I would like to see is, originally when these guys were released, they were pretty overpowered, and a lot of people were really frustrated by fighting these because you stack up all the evasion. I think it was just because people were inexperienced with fighting the Sisters, and so it was making them really hard to kill these guys, especially if you pop some smoke and these guys would have a bunch of evasion. But I think they should actually recant their changes. I think the Arcos should be able to benefit from the rites of intercession. It seems very strange to me that these would not be able to benefit from the additional attack. They don't seem like they're so powerful that that would be amazing with kind of the power creep that's happened. I don't think it makes any sense that Arcos can't benefit from that, but the Sisters of Repentia can, or the Canoness can. Some of these units that are much more powerful. So I think that was just a lot of negativity that people were bringing because they just weren't very experienced playing against the Adeptus Sororitas. So again, I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be able to benefit from that, because even using the Zealous Fury, a couple of these guys getting double attacks is not going to be such craziness, especially if they're suffering evasion penalties and things. That's going to be easier for you to kill them the following turn. So I'm just trying to think, should I cut it off here? I think I probably will. So we went through 4 factions today. I'll make a second video here and I'll go through the last 4. Most of them are pretty quick. The only one that's going to change is the orcs, and that's because, or going to be longer, is going to be the orcs. And the reason for that is they've totally reworked how the orcs units work now compared to when they were first released. They did a total rebalancing. Some of the changes are really good and some of them less so. So I'll just give my thoughts on the new orc units now with the balancing patch. So I hope this is helpful. I just wanted to give my opinion on some different units since things have changed so dramatically since this game has been rebalanced since release. I hope they definitely continue to do that, because it's definitely helping make all the factions become more viable here with the rebalancing work, and I think they're doing good changes here, so hopefully that continues. So thanks for watching. I hope you're enjoying these videos. If you are, please give my channel a like and subscribe to encourage me to post more content for you. Have a great day.